Folks, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show. We are joined today by a legendary person and a master musician and a hero of mine, Mike Longo. Welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Oh, thank you, sir. Glad to be here. Glad to be any place.
No, we're still here. As the great Tucci Munoz tells me, we're still here. Can you talk to the audience about your earliest understanding of how the Baha'is use music as a healing power?
I never really thought of it that way. I think the music does that by itself.
What role did music play in Baha'i culture, I guess? Maybe that's the better question.
Baha'is consider art to be of the highest order, and so anyone who strives at an art form with all their heart is considered worship in the Baha'i faith, and so therefore there's a bounty that comes with that. And so the Baha'i faith describes art as the expression of the blessed beauty through established techniques. And so music is of the highest, is thought of as one of the highest forms of art there is.
Dizzy hipped you to the Baha'i faith?
Well, ironically, the first night I played on his band was the first night he heard about the Baha'i faith.
The first night Dizzy ever heard about it?
Yeah.
That's great. Who did he get
This
hit?
lady named Beth McKenty.
Oh.
She called Dizzy. My first gig with Dizzy was at the Vanguard in Milwaukee.
63?
66, end of 66.
I'm always okay. So 66 at the
It was
Vanguard.
December 11th, 1966.
There was a Vanguard in Milwaukee. That's
Yeah.
That's cool.
And so Beth had called Dizzy and said that she wanted to talk to him about something, and she was saying that Charlie Parker didn't have to die the way he died. And so I remember they were sitting at a table, her and her husband, and they were talking to Dizzy, and I guess they gave him some literature. In the meantime, Dizzy and I got very tight because it was during all the race riots on there. I was out there, man. I was getting hated by both sides.
The integrated bands took it on the chin worse than if it was just a black band or a white band.
Yeah, at that time, there was maybe one or two of us.
Gaffa wasn't in the group at that point?
No.
It was Finch. Who else was in that group?
Candy Finch was the bass player was white. Frank Schifano.
Oh, Schifano. So you guys were getting hated on in the Midwest, and and it was in the middle.
Oh, you kidding, man? I got hit with a bottle on the stage in Pittsburgh.
You didn't walk. You guys didn't leave the stage at that point. You still kept playing.
Man, and I kept playing, and the next day we were playing in the ghetto, and they had a stage set up in the street, and people were glaring at me, man, like they wanted to kill me. And we got to the stage, and I had 4 FBI agents and 4 Black Panthers surrounding the piano while I played. And Dizzy and Moody, they were like scared to death. And Dizzy had gone on television.
Did Schifano have protection?
At that point, Schifano had left the group, so it was Paul West at that point.
I guess when
Schifano left, I was the only white guy on the band then.
When Dizzy started to marinate in the Baha'i faith, and so did you, especially during those riots, did you find yourself unconsciously creating, movement music, social consciousness music that grew, instead of just trying to increase vocabulary to inspire people because of what you were seeing in society?
Well, look, man, there's the way you feel about things like what you're mentioning, and then when you play, you're trained in such a way that it's like if I'm playing in front of 100,000 people or one person, it's the same thing. It's another day in the gym. And so when I'm playing, I go to a place, and that place is a heavenly place. And so those kinds of things that you're talking about have no power over, because that's too strong for them.
Well, but how did you feel when you had Secret Service and FBI agents around you? That's
I felt like, boy, if you ever played the blues, you better play them now.
Can you play a little bit of blues for the audience?
Play a little blues?
Yeah, a little Chitlin Circuit blues. Nothing but the blues, Mike Longo. I'd like you to talk to the audience about how your dad and met, how you guys connected with Cannonball, and that definitive moment in the diner that had an impact on you.
Actually, it wasn't. It was in a country club.
It was a country club, even better. But Cannon came down. Cannon came to Florida, right?
Well, he's from Tampa, but he graduated from A&M, and he got
really Florida A&M.
Yeah.
Wow.
And he got a gig at what it was called Dillard High School, across the tracks. He was the band director, and so my first encounter with him was, at that time, Fort Lauderdale was this little burg, man. It wasn't like the metropolis. So there was this one black church, and the lady that played piano died, and they had nobody to play the service. So Cannonball called the band director at my school and said, "Want to know if anybody could." He said, "Well, there's this kid over there who's sort of got a feel for this kind of stuff."
I love it. Is it Sanctified Church?
Yeah.
Wow. So the band director was like.
So he said, they told him about me. So I hadn't met the Cannonball, so I went that Sunday and the preacher auditioned me and I got the gig, you know. And so I was playing, but then there was a disc jockey by the name of Leonce Pico, had a midnight to 6 a.m. jazz show on WFTL. And at the time, there was a big problem with teenage drinking. People were getting killed in accidents, and so they started.
What was the drinking age at that time? Was it 18 or?
No, 21.
So, but cats were drinking real young and driving and getting killed.
Yeah. And so they started this series of teenage nightclubs where they served soft drinks, but it would be like a nightclub environment. At that time, it was R&B, but it was jazz-laced R&B.
Boogaloo?
Hmm?
Kind of boogaloo-ish?
No, way before that.
R&B laced jazz or jazz laced R&B.
Yeah, it was.
Oh, that's great.
This was before Elvis and all that kind of stuff.
Wow.
This was like,
Before rock and roll was.
Yeah, it was stuff like Night Train and that, but the solos were like the cats were playing like Cannonball. And so this guy was doing a jam session at the Hollywood Youth Center. So he called me and asked me, he said, would I mind playing with a Negro? I said, no, man, I don't mind playing with anybody. Anyway, the Negro turned out to be Cannonball. And it blew me away. I mean, I heard him, you know. And so he gave me his card. So I told my father, man, I said, you wouldn't believe what I heard, man. And so my dad had this gig. They were dedicating the Gateway Shopping Center. It was just being built. And
wow.
So he had the gig to play the street dance with a big bandstand in the middle of the street. They were breaking the ground. So he said, hire him for the gig. And so there had never been a mixed band in Fort Lauderdale before.
First interracial band in Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah. And so Cannonball, he must have been making about $70 a week as a teacher. And the gig paid $75. And so he came on the gig, and I remember it was a big full moon out that night, man. And so as soon as he walked up on the bandstand, this big hush came over the crowd. And he started playing Stars Fell in Alabama, and it just melted everybody. Everybody started dancing. It was like gorgeous, you know. Mm. So my dad started using him regularly on club dates. So we moved to a part of Fort Lauderdale called Plantation. We were one of the first families out there. So they had a country club. Now my dad, he was in the wholesale produce business. So they were one of his customers. But he was also a member of the country club. So they hired his band to play a dance. So when we got off of the set, the maitre d' said, we have a table set up for the band to eat. So we all went over to the table to eat, and about 5 minutes later, he comes over and says, we've had some complaints about the colored boy. He's going to have to go eat in the kitchen. And my dad threw his napkin, and I says, come on, we'll all go eat in the kitchen. And so we got up, and as he walked in, he yelled to the guy, he said, and you could take my membership and shove it up your ass. He told the guy, from that point on.
What year was that? Do you know, 1950?
That would be 50, close to 55, 54.
What did you play with? Was there a trap drummer in the church that Cannon played at? I mean, the Sanctified Church is often
no, it was just
tambourines and clapping and
all that, but me, just me on piano.
And Cannon on sax?
No, he wasn't even there.
You played piano with, and you led the congregation.
No, the preacher did. I just played.
He
handed me a hymn book, and it was like I was reading it just like. And he said, "No, jazz it up a little bit." So I started. He said, "Yeah, that's it." So I got the gig.
Can you give a little taste of it? I'd love.
Without the
pre, without
having a book, something like this.
I listen to that all day.
Yeah.
And then you, when did you get a chance to go on the Chitlin circuit? I forget who the band.
Cannonball.
So you went with Cannon on the Chitlin circuit.
He got me the gig because my dad was getting him all this work. So there was a cat by the name of Harold Ferguson who had a shoe shine stand in one of the shopping centers. And the drummer that I played with in high school, he could really play, Pete Helmentaler. He had met this cat and we became friends, and so Cannon recommended us for the gig, and Cannon wasn't the leader, he was just a side man too. So we were playing with the Harold Ferguson band up and down the coast of Florida, and all the what they call the Chitlin services. They would have a band, a blues singer, a comedian, and the chorus girl. I know
nobody walking on glass or anything.
No.
Yeah.
You mentioned snake dance. I said shake dance.
Shake dance. Well, I'm still I've straightened that out. Yeah, it was shake dancers. You were playing to people's moves.
Yeah.
You're playing to their moves. You wrote your compositions are always very kind of. Can you talk about how the moves of boxers and the you told me before about sort of like the way a boxer would go back and forth and sort of weave and bob and weave. Sometimes the germs of songs take off from that. Where does the germ of a song come from with Mike Longo? How much of it has to do with your own natural rhythm and the rhythms that you perceive, body rhythms, shake dancer rhythms, that kind of stuff?
Actually, one of the biggest parts of that, because my first attempts at composition were awful. And so one of the biggest things is to be able to recognize an inspired germ that comes from a certain place in you. You see, when people talk about the blues and all that, what you're really expressing is what people refer to as the Holy Spirit. In the black church, the reason that was so prevalent because they didn't have anything else. That was it. And so
they were singing the blues.
Yeah, the Holy Spirit. And
the Holy Spirit, that's right.
And so I'm able to recognize, like I could be just noodling and all of a sudden some accident will happen at the piano. And I say, hey, there's something. And so I play with that. Next thing you know, a piece of music starts to unfold on the paper, and then I don't compose as much as I reveal. So what I do is uncover music rather than compose it. It already exists. It's out there.
How long a process did that take once you became a professional? I mean,
at this point in time, I won't write anything unless it comes from that. The only difference that can make as a professional is if somebody says $3,000. When they say that, the pencil jumps up.
But I guess more to the point, like when Dizzy brought you in and you were doing a lot of writing, you had already started cultivating that gift of revealing.
Well, actually, it started with Dizzy because what happened was we were playing in San Francisco at the Jazz Workshop.
With Moody?
Huh?
With Moody?
Moody, yeah, that group with Moody. And so this one night the band was so hot, man. Everything was grooving. And so I went back to the hotel and I couldn't go to sleep. And I kept hearing the band play in my head. And I said, man, what I'm hearing in my head is nothing we play. So I got a pencil out and I wrote down what I was hearing.
Wow, man.
And so I wrote it down. The next day I brought it in and Dizzy started playing it, and that's how it started. But then I went, Dizzy and I became very close friends, actually. And so we would play the West Coast maybe 2-3 months at a time and then come back. And so Benny Carter invited Dizzy to dinner, and Dizzy took me as his guest. So I asked Benny, I said, hey, man, when I'm out here, could I study arranging with you? He said, you don't want to study arranging. He said, you want to study classical composition. So when you get back to New York, you find you a good classical composition teacher. And so when I came back to New York, I studied 2 years of counterpoint with Frank Fields, who was an older black gentleman. His brother was Irving Fields, the jazz trumpet player, but Frank had no. He didn't touch jazz. He was in the true sense of the word, a classical music genius.
Jeez, well
He wrote the book, scored the Body and Soul of the John Garfield movie, but he didn't get credit because of racism. And one day he came up here, man, and he played a symphony he wrote for me on the piano. I said, "Damn, Frank," and he wouldn't take. He was teaching a whole bunch of us. He wouldn't take. He only let you pay $5 a lesson. He said, "It's not worth any more than that. That's just the facts. That's the facts." But I was his prize student. I'd write something, and he'd say, "See, that's what music's all about, right there, right there." And so the week he was dying, man, he wrote this opera, Sacco and Vanzetti, and it got rave reviews, and he's in the hospital dying, man. And like Frank Gaskin Fields, and somebody should do a special or something about him, man.
I'm really glad you hit me to that, man. That's really interesting.
I mean, he was in a class with somebody like Mendelssohn or somebody. He was one of those kind of guys.
We're looking here at, there's Dizzy, and was that Moody and Dizzy?
Yeah.
And there's Moody, and all these beautiful vestiges of years gone by. But one cat I wanted to ask you about is Oscar Peterson. A lot of cats said he played very straight.
Straight?
I don't know if that's the right word. How would you characterize, what was his legacy to American music?
Oscar? Man, if there's any word that would describe Oscar Peterson, it would be artist with a double capital A.
Not a musician, but an artist, or both.
No, he was a musician, but he was an artist.
He was painting.
He was a master of the instrument. If you listen to him play tenderly, man, with that delicate touch, he was thorough. He had me practicing 13 hours a day, man.
Anyway, Benny Carter. This is really fascinating. Benny Carter said, "Don't go to jazz composition. Go to classical."
He said, "Don't study arranging. Study classical composition."
That is okay. That's very important for peeps listening. I'm not sure what kind of advice they're getting today, but why did you go to study with? What did Oscar?
No, I didn't study that one. I had already studied with Oscar at that point. Well, I came back to New York and I studied with Frank Fields until he died, and then I studied with Hall Overton, classical composition, until he died. And as a result, there was a gig on the East Side. I had, because Dizzy was doing a lot of these all-star tours with Monk and people like that. And so when Dizzy would be on the road, I had this gig where I'd play, and when I went out with Dizzy, I'd put a sub in. But when I was studying classical composition, I'd go to the gig, and next thing you know, my playing was doing all this different stuff. And so it was seeping over into my jazz playing from studying it. And so even when I was with Dizzy, man, I was writing 4 or 5 fugues a day.
Fugues?
Yeah.
You're fuguing your way through it?
Yeah.
Holy cow.
And so as a result of that, it just automatically translated itself into my jazz music by itself. It's just a byproduct of it. So I'm sure Benny knew that was going to happen.
Oscar, can you play something in memory of Oscar Peterson? I feel his presence very strongly right now. younger cats out there, the name of that tune?
Pardon me?
What was the name of that tune?
Tenderly.
We're looking here. You have three different African drums, conga drums in here. You played. You always used. One of the greatest drummers of all time, Mickey Roker. But Potato, you used a lot on congas, bongos, and when you're composing now, how do you use the conga drum? Like, do you play in order to create space, or I would love you to take us through that.
These drums are here for my students because jazz education at this point has totally neglected the African part of jazz.
I think I started my show 7 years ago because of that exact reason. But you can explain better. Why?
Well, there's several reasons. There are different forms of racism that sometimes are not on the surface. With people don't even know that's what the reason is. But what you have now is a situation where people are trying to play jazz with a touch that you play Mozart with.
The classicalization of jazz.
And that is not going to work. And so instead of digging jazz in terms of itself, they're trying to filter it through classical music. And so the underlying structural rhythm in jazz is entirely different. For example, I tell my students sometimes, the way you understand an aspect of music is very important. Because somebody can understand something about music that will pass a course at Juilliard, but may have no bearing whatsoever to do with playing. And so I'll ask them what meter is. And so they'll say something like, 4/4 is 4 beats of measure, a quarter. I said, no, that's Juilliard stuff. I said,
wow.
I said, you ever hear it in classical music described as strong beat on 1, weak beat on 2, less strong beat on 3, weak beat on 4. So if you listen to that, it sounds like this: doom 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 doom. You hear that Mozart bass lines: doom ding doom ding doom ding doom. Beethoven sonata, boom 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 boom. So that's the underlying structural rhythm in classical music, but that's mono rhythm. And
not polyrhythm.
No, and it's not poly.
It's so important.
So the thing that makes jazz distinguishable is polymetricity. You're in more than one meter, for example.
Wow.
If you listen to this, here's the underlying structural rhythm in jazz. Now, if I say count that, some people say 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4. But watch this: 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 4, 5, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 1, 2. Now watch. Different with my hands, and so all those cross rhythms and
It's a polymetric.
polymetricity. So that's the difference.
You're telling me that Juilliard's, I'm sure they have a jazz program, but they're known as a classical school. But you're telling me that jazz programs, by and large, are not teaching polymetricity.
They don't understand it. They don't even know it exists.
Is that because the too many cats are no longer with us, like Potato? I mean, Candido's still. I mean, what I'm saying is you're playing all these undulating.
Potato never taught in school, man.
But how does the racism correlate to? Do you think it's racism? I mean, do you think it's
well, there's different forms of racism. For example, Europeans. I had a situation I can tell you about. I was playing a club in Paris called the Latitude Jazz Club.
How long ago was this?
In the 90s. And so Tommy Flanagan was following me in. so Tommy and Diane, his wife, they showed up on Friday to hear me. They were opening on Monday. So in the club, they had decorated. They had these. Do you ever see those jockeys you see in the yard? They had black people like
Wow.
looking like, and Mrs. Flanagan said, "Take these pictures down. Take these statues down, or Tommy will not play here." So the next night, they came down and they had sheets over. Now they looked like the Ku Klux Klan. And so she made this big stink and all that. So the lady that booked us there invited my wife and me and Tommy and his wife to a big dinner she had on the Sunday night, or the night off. And there was all these French aristocrats, and she had this huge, opulent apartment downtown. And so my wife and I were sitting at one end of the table, and Tommy and his wife. And so this woman across from me brought it up. She says, "You people don't understand. We're not racist over here. We love black people." I said, "Excuse me, ma'am." I said, what you just said is another form of racism. I said, "Why is that?" I said, "Because you think because you look at black people with these cute little teddy bear type things, that makes you not." I said, "But what it shows is you're not looking at somebody like yourself. You don't see somebody like yourself when you see it."
What did she say to you? She said, we're not racist.
We're not racist like you guys think. We love black people over
Because
here.
they think of them as teddy bears?
No, I said because they have this illusion of black people as being these cute little... I said, that just shows that you don't see a black person as someone just like yourself.
Just as a human.
And so Tommy Flanagan's wife said, "Thank you. And Tommy said, "That's some hip shit, man."
You know, it's funny. You're the second cat recently that's told me, they like Johnny Griffin and Dexter, they moved to Europe, but it wasn't any less racist over there. There were still black people sweeping the streets. There's a lot of undulating that exists in Europe too. It wasn't because they didn't go to Europe. I guess the music was respected, but they weren't respected there.
Well, the thing is people, they have this idea that there's a black way to play and a white way to. Dizzy and I knew better, because it wasn't about race, it's about rhythm. And so that polymetric thing is, because I have students who, when they learn that, they start sounding like what people would say is, "You sound black." And I said, "Now, tell me, did you just turn black, or did you just learn something about rhythm?"
I mean, this is mind-boggling. Why? But I mean, if there's, how could like Warren Smith all these guys that are steeped in polymetrics, it's not part of the curriculum?
There's another thing you need to understand, that all black people don't know this stuff either. Dizzy, you should talk to Randy Weston.
I did, but not about this.
Okay, well, talk to him about Dizzy, because he will tell you there's a tradition in African culture that every so often the Creator sends a musical prophet to lift the people to another. And he said Dizzy was one of those. So Dizzy's understanding of rhythm is way beyond. Because I could tell you a story. A lot of people might not like to hear this. But
go ahead.
I won't mention the name, but a black playwright who was very militant wrote this article about how Dizzy and Charlie Parker made this music so white people couldn't play it. And Dizzy and I were driving in the car, and I showed that to Dizzy, and Dizzy said, "Mike, I'm so far above this kind of shit, you have no idea." And so what Dizzy knew transcended race. And I know people got offended because I made some remark about where they wanted to change the name to BAM, Black American Music. And I was saying that's just like an us against them kind of thing, and I didn't subscribe to it. I said,
right.
I feel like it's much more than that now. Every book I ever read on jazz starts out with King Oliver and all those, and so nobody ever said it wasn't that. But the point is, one guy he's saying white musicians are threatened because, for some reason, he said nobody has any problem with opera being Italian or German? And my answer was, I believe Italy and Germany are countries. I know of no country named Black. And I said, imagine, because the Creator gives a gift to all kinds of people. So there are gifted African American opera singers. But suppose they said, what you're singing is Caucasian Italian opera. You don't think that would put something on that guy's head? And so I'm a little bit sick of older generation messing with the minds of young people and prolonging that, because that could put a psychological effect on a young student that could actually hurt that student.
You're saying that taboo still exists today in terms of that line from the old guard.
Yeah, imagine if they said what you're studying is like suppose they called Chopin's music Caucasian Polish music. So now you got a black pianist playing and said, that's not going to put something on his head? You dig what I'm saying? And so...
But, what would Dizzy say about the fact that the street rhythms, that these undulating polymetrics, they come from the street. Jazz is a street music. Once it gets codified in academia, everyone's going to start... You're going to lose it. It's going to become classicalized. What would he say to that?
He didn't agree with it.
Did he not think that jazz should be in the academy?
It's hard to answer a question like that because I have a DVD series out called The Rhythmic Nature of Jazz. If the academy was teaching what's in that DVD series, then it would belong in the academy. But they're not teaching that. They're teaching people what to play instead of how to play. And so the how part comes from Africa. And so any kind of denial of that is, now I don't say it's overt racism, but...
it's covert.
I don't know, I don't have the vocabulary for it, but the point is to exclude that from the study of jazz is in my estimation, almost criminal in the sense of like the harm it's doing to young people. Like stuff like playing with the metronome on 2 and 4. The metronome's not a pulse, man. This here is a pulse. When you touch here and you feel that, the way that beat is, that's the way you keep time in jazz. You don't tick, 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 tick.
And everyone's got their own heart.
Try to jump rope to the metronome and watch what happens.
So if you, in a synopsis for academics, professors, and teachers, what's in the rhythmic components of jazz in that DVD series that they may want to get hip to and even incorporate into their curriculums?
What I did was took Dizzy's whole rhythmic concept in the order that I learned it. And it has to be learned in stages. It's much deeper than people think.
Yeah, no, I know. We've been through it before.
Bertha Hope came and took some lessons with me. And when I showed her...
Elmo's wife.
Yeah. When I showed her how to play 5 and 4/4 at the same time, she said, I can't believe we missed that. And so at this point in time, look, what I'm going to do is play 5/4 and 4/4 at the same time. So watch. 1, 2, 3, 4. Ba ba be da ba sha 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now you hear that in Dizzy's phrasing, and he'll say ba dum da 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 da. That's got 5/4 in it, man. And that plus the whole idea of polymetric, and in the DVD series are things that I learned from Dizzy that work as catalysts. In other words, you play this, next thing you know, something's happening on your instrument that wasn't happening before. And so a big part of playing jazz is your touch. And you won't even hear that mentioned and you go to any jazz department, they don't even have a clue about that. You have to have a jazz touch. And so the way that this rhythmic stuff is translated into the music is through a touch. And all you got to do is play that touch and the music will come out a certain way. There's a word called ontology. Dizzy's music was ontological in nature.
What does ontological mean?
If you look it up in the dictionary, it's a metaphysical term. It's the science of existence, but it's based on the idea that all of man's cognitive ability comes from the same source,
Mm-hmm.
which in a religious sense would be God. But in a musical sense, Stravinsky is the first person I ever heard use the word ontological music. So Stravinsky didn't consider that he composed rather than he uncovered music. And
Wow.
I remember a lot of my students get confused because he and Ravel had a lot of respect for each other. And so Ravel made a statement once. He said, the miracle of the rite of spring lies in its entity. And so my students asked me, what do you mean by that? And I said, I think he means, look how became the rite of spring. Now Dizzy used to say the same thing in his own way. He would say, man, this music's just out here waiting for somebody to come get it. And he told me once, eventually you just end up playing sounds. But that sound, there's even like, what's that? I forget, like the Maharishi when they all that stuff.
Yeah, sure.
Well, there's something called the Kundalini, which is a part of jazz. Dizzy, I mentioned this in DVD 4.
Kundalini and jazz.
Yeah, Dizzy. I don't know if you. I don't want to embarrass you. I can use words.
Sure.
Okay, there was a movie called A Night in Havana, where Lorraine, Dizzy's wife, got mad at him because he answered this lady, was interviewing and asked him, where does your music come from? And he said, you really want to know? He says, yeah. He said, my asshole. And everybody laughing, and like he was being facetious, but he was being on the level, man. There's an energy in the base of your spine, man. It's sometimes referred to as Kundalini energy. You can read up about it. But it's a definite part of this music.
No, absolutely. I mean, in the yogic sense, I'm aware of it.
Yeah.
I wasn't in the jazz sense, though.
Well,
but I guess
see if you hear anything about that in the jazz department.
Before my cell phone battery dies, I just wanted to put it in a request. Such a brilliant cat. Mike Longo on the mend. He's got gigs coming up in September. I don't know. How do you pronounce the tune? Wyoya?
Pardon me?
What's the tune on Pablo? The W-Y-O...
Wyoya?
Can you play Wyoya?
Not actually, really, man, because it was written for so many horns, and so like certain guys are playing the melody, and other guys are playing.
What about Angel? There's a tune like an Angel.
Angel of Love.
Angel of Love. Let's just finish with some beautiful. Play something from your heart, man. I've had such a ball.
Oh man.
Angel of Love.
Oh, that's another one. See that
with horns.
I had as in parts, you know.
Love you, Mike Longo. Continued success, brother. Carry on.
Thank you.
Dizzy lives. This is the Jake Feinberg Show. We'll see you tomorrow.